Am I live? Yes, I am. I'm live. It's the Nazarite, bringing you Hebrew lore from days of yore. Again, days of yore is a relative term. Let's talk 70-something years ago. So this video is going to be on sacrifice and salvation as I see it right now, because here's what's up. So I'm an Israeli living for a few years in the Netherlands. And I recently found out that in the Netherlands, and perhaps in other European countries, but I don't know, I just know what, here, the days of May 4th and 5th are the remembrance of the dead and Liberation Day, respectively. And it is there to remember the fallen of World War II and the liberation when the Nazis were driven out of the Netherlands. I didn't go into the details, but those 2 days signify that. And right now, at this very moment in Israel, there was the remembrance of the dead and the fallen. And this evening, that is at this very moment now, the different things commemorating the Day of Independence begin. 71, right? Yes, 71 years of independence for the state of Israel. So I want to talk about what those two ideas sort of encompass or present or posit or however you want to put it. The idea of having a day of remembrance followed by a day of liberation. The idea of remembering your fallen brothers and sisters and celebrating that which they fell for. Now you can argue over the validity of, war to begin with, and reasons people go to war, not the least of which is Israel, and then what's going on there. So I'm not even going to try and talk about that because that's pointless and it's going to get political real quick, and I don't want to do that. What I do want to talk about is the idea of sacrifice as the precursor to salvation. So I wrote a couple of things. Okay. All right. So when I think of liberation and the idea of having death and suffering and tragedy and malevolence of people and of like human, almost makes you wonder, about the entirety of the human race. That kind of evil. That evil is always there. And it, comes in different shapes and forms and people and times and whatnot. The 20th century and all that. I mean, there's so many horrible things still going on. And there's the idea that these two coincidences, the idea of the May 4th and 5th, and then is the Remembrance Day and Independence Day in Israel, it's this idea that sadness is mixed together with joy and celebration. It's always, always a very weird cocktail, which I have been experiencing basically ever since I was a kid, right? Ever since I grew up there in Israel, and it's always very weird. The Day of Remembrance is a very solemn day and a day full of pain and tears, and again, not discounting anyone else's pain and tears, but that's what it is for me being an Israeli. And then to kind of seamlessly just shift, well, not seamlessly, there's a very definite and defined seam, but it's still a transition that's difficult. It's even more difficult for those who are mourning their loved ones. I don't have anyone from my close family who died in the military or in a terrorist attack. I've had friends and stuff, but that's a different issue. Not family. It's not the same thing. Sacrifice is the precursor is the precursor to salvation. Now we choose our sacrifice. Dr. Jordan Peterson has a lot going on there when he's talking about that. The whole point is that you choose your load, you choose your sacrifice. And if the goal, if the aim is high enough, worth it enough, like on every level that you can conceive, or the big ones or whatever, however you want to think of it, it makes it worth it overall. Thousands and thousands of people died in the defense of Israel, and millions died, in World War II. War is a horrible thing. I have minimal experience with it. I mean, as a combat soldier, minimal, but I still had the experience. It's not fun at all. And having a day like this where we remember our fallen, having a day when we remember the sacrifice that it took, I'm not even going to take it in a whole Zionist religious spiritual thing, even though I could. I'm just talking about the universal idea right here. I'm not even talking about the state of Israel. None of that. I'm not touching the Zionism or the politics right now. I'm just talking about the fact that I need to choose goals. And I think I am doing that in part, choosing goals that are very high and well worth the price that you pay. And there are times when you may be going through things and you think I chose the wrong thing. But I think that as long as you choose it with real sincerity and honesty and awareness and wanting to do the right thing, and that's very subjective, but with me, I know that it's a day like today when suddenly it's Independence Day and it's this joy. But certainly during the night and the day later, it's still very much soaked with the tears of the day before. Human beings, their greatness, I think, is in what they choose to follow through on. And sometimes you go through hell. And what, Churchill, right? If you're going through hell, keep walking, or something like that, right? Perseverance and courage. A few years ago, someone defined courage to me in a great way. I don't remember who, under what circumstances, but he said, some people mistake courage for lack of fear. Courage is being afraid, but doing it anyway. If you're not afraid, then you can't be courageous, or something like that. There's a connection there. It may not be precisely the way it went down, because you can be courageous and valiant even without fear, but the idea of being brave, fighting for something you believe in, and persevering and going for it no matter what, that to me is a very Hebrew idea. And in a way, it's also the way I feel as a modern day Nazarite, because so many people, especially on the Orthodox side, the Jewish Orthodox side, the people that I have been in contact with and spoken with here and there, nothing in depth. The ones who spoke to me in depth actually sort of have come around to the idea, but some people there are very, sometimes it's a lonely road. But I believe wholeheartedly that what I'm trying to do here for myself is worth whatever I'm paying. The price I'm paying is worth it because there's a vision connected with it for me. And people in the Netherlands, people in World War II, people in the state of Israel are fighting and were fighting and still are fighting for deliverance, even if they may not be the ones who will reap that benefit and those fruit. There's a labor that you put in. You don't have to do everything, but you need to do your part. Some people do their part and they live to tell the tale, and they live to see amazing days and less amazing days, and some die and they're still soldiers their entire life. you know they don't get to go through so many things. And I believe in the idea of reincarnation, and I believe that we do what we got to do and then we go, as someone once told me. So there's still a lot of injustice and sort of arbitrary just negativity or chaos, right? Nature balancing itself out, human nature balancing itself out. I've been rereading the prophets. I'm at Jeremiah right now, and that is such a sad story. And if I start going on with Jeremiah, I won't finish. The reason I bring him up now is because when the people of Israel thought that they could not get any worse, Babylon, right? Nebuchadnezzar, the king, came with his generals and burned down Jerusalem and burned the temple and burned the king's palace and all the homes there. And it was horrible. And he exiled them all on foot before they could get to the ships or Babylon. I'm not sure how they got there. In ships, I'm pretty sure. Point is, in the beginning, they're on foot. Jeremiah gets a chance to stay or join them in Babylon. He chooses to stay with the people, with the just tiny bits of Judea that were left. And he tells them, stay here. Stay here and serve, suffer under the yoke of the king of Babylon, and it will be good. You will be delivered. And if you don't stay here, and if you go down to Egypt, where I said you should not return, and where I'm telling you you should not return now, then even more of you are going to get, chopped down. I'm paraphrasing. They went there, and it was a whole thing, but it was a great tragedy. And that tragedy continued for 70 years of exile. And it was only 70 years. But in those 70 years, so much was forgotten. By the time they came back to Zion, after the king of Persia gave them leave to do so, many things were forgotten. When the state of Israel came about, it was just the remnants of the Jews of Europe and whoever was able to, get away from the different persecutions, and the ones in the East were living better than the ones in the West. Not of Europe, I mean of the world. And they came there, and there was a fight, and there's an ongoing fight. But I really do believe, and it's true to me, it's true to the state of Israel, and it's true to every individual. I think it's a human thing. You choose your sacrifice, and you bear that cross, if you will. You suffer, but you suffer for something that you know is worth it. And we each have a different idea of what that is. Sacrifice and salvation. Sometimes I hear Christians talk about being saved. Now, I can't fully relate, since Jesus has not saved me, or I have not accepted him. See it however you will. But salvation, being saved, being delivered, being liberated, freedom, it's like a big, big, big word. But I think at the end of the day, for me, it's being able to do this, to sit in front of this camera, to talk to you people live, even if there's no one watching. I don't know, I'm on a different screen. The point is, this is freedom in a way that has never been, ever, on a lot of levels. Many people sacrificed themselves in World War II. Many people sacrificed themselves for the state of Israel, continue to do so. Many people sacrificed themselves in a way so I can sit here and talk in front of this laptop. We don't know what the sacrifices we make are going to yield necessarily. But I think that if the goal, the aim, is high enough, is good enough, is righteous enough, that there's a lot of merit to it. And I know that sometimes I can't see it with me personally. Sometimes there's no amount of despair, but it's very important not to despair. And even in times of great, great, great distress, be courageous. You can fear for what's going on all around you, for your very soul, and you can still be courageous. So I'm going to say happy Independence Day to the State of Israel. And since it's only a couple of days old, happy Liberation Day to the Netherlands and Europe. Out of the ashes of all that went down in World War II, the State of Israel was born. Not the Kingdom of Israel, but the State of Israel. Not the people, but the state as we know it. And that's no small thing. I have a lot to say about Israel, but I mean the modern day current state of Israel, but I'll save that for another time. For now, I'll just bless us all, that we may make good choices, righteous choices, ones that are not just good for us, but that are good for a collective, that can be passed down to our kids. Ways and means of really being a righteous person and doing what's good for others, for creation, and for ourselves. Let's have a wonderful day, a wonderful evening. Happy birthday, Israel.